lot of parents in this season are concerned about how to manage the digital world with parenting.
This has consequence on our national economies. I said it in the book. Part of the reason we're seeing rampant corruption is that people are saving money for generations of one to cushion them from a life that they didn't get them ready for.
Yeah. Hello there, welcome to Dovers with Chinwe. It's great to be here once again. I always say that, and I really mean it. I love being on the show, and it really gives me great pleasure to know that you are out there with us today. Today we're going to be talking about courtship. How should couples who are courting conduct themselves in their relationship, and what are the things they should be looking out for while they court? That is going to be the thrust of our program today, and I'm hoping that we have enough couples in courtship that are listening and watching us today. So if you know anyone who is in that category, please, this show is about them. Call them to please come and listen to what we have to say, okay? Don't go away, we'll be right back with lots more. A lot of parents in this season are concerned about how to manage the digital world with parenting.
This has consequence on our national economies. I said it in the book. Part of the reason we're seeing rampant corruption is that people are saving money for generations of one to cushion them from a life that they didn't get them ready for.
Yeah. Welcome back to the show. And like I said, today we're going to be talking to courting couples, people who have decided that they want to get married and are now putting their plans in place for the wedding and the marriage. So what is courtship anyway? Like I said earlier, courtship is that period in a relationship between a man and a woman when they have decided that we're going to tie the knot, we're going to get married, okay? The guy has formally asked the girl to marry him and she has said, yes, I will marry you. And the relationship is still on, because they now decided that they're taking it beyond just knowing each other, getting to know one another, but they actually wanted to get married. Now, what's the difference between this and when you're dating? At the dating stage, you are still just discovering one another. You're deciding whether or not you want this to be permanent. You are, so to speak, just looking, checking things out to see if this person is the person you want to spend the rest of your life with. You're getting to know their families. You're getting to, understand how he and he operates. And you're deciding, do I want this for the rest of my life? That is dating. But when you get into courtship, you have made up your mind that I want this for the rest of your life. You decided this is what you want, this is how you want it, and you're happy with what you have. And so you're deciding that we're going to take the next step, which is to get married. All right? Now that you have made that decision, I just want to remind you of something. That when you make up your mind to get married, you understand that there's someone who initiated the whole marriage concept in the first place. And God has a plan for marriage. One thing you must always remember is that marriage is a covenant and not a contract. So having decided to get into it, you're getting into something that is beyond a piece of paper that you're signing, okay? It's a covenant pact you're getting into, okay? And because it's a covenant pact, it requires a little more commitment and intentionality than a contract. When I sign a contract with somebody over anything, maybe a piece of work or whatever, that contract has every contract has the terms under which it can be terminated, all right? But a marriage contract, trust me, there is nowhere that is written on it that in the event that so happens, you are free to walk out of this relationship. Even in a physical marriage contract, it's not there. And that is because marriage is actually not just a contract, but a covenant. It's a covenant you go into, making up your mind that I'm going to go into this and I'm going to stay in it. Okay? So don't have a contract attitude to something that is a covenant thing. Don't. A contract attitude is well, if it works, it works. If it doesn't work, I find my way. If you have that attitude, it will not work. You have to have an attitude of, this is a covenant I'm getting into and I want it to work. And I'm going to give it everything that I can to make sure that it works. That is the background, the foundation on which you even build in the courtship relationship. There are a few questions. Some people say, so how long is good for you to be in courtship before you finally get married? Can I really answer that question? I don't think so. Because for some couples, because of how long they dated, okay, courtship can be short. For some other couples, because they haven't dated long, they can make courtship longer. There are no ground rules to it, but there are certain things that I believe should be clear, and you should tick the box before you finally walk down the aisle. Lastly, I would want to emphasize the fact that courtship is not the time you plan for wedding. The wedding is just one day. You fix a date, families come together, they make it as loud as they want to or as quiet as they want to, and that day is gone. Then the real marriage relationship starts. Courtship is about preparing yourselves more for the marriage relationship than the wedding day. So look beyond the wedding day, because the wedding day is just one day. I hear this all the time, but I find that most couples are just focused on the glamour of doing the traditional wedding, the glamour, and these days the glamour is more because there's social media to amplify it, and so everybody seems to think, the whole plan and everything is centered around the days that you're going to be celebrating. What happens after? Nobody's giving it much thought. This is the time for you to begin to put structures in place for what happens after the wedding day, not necessarily the wedding day. Am I asking you not to plan your wedding? Of course not. I mean, you should have a good time at it. But it's not just about the wedding day. Your getting married is more than the wedding day. And the courtship period is also the time for you to look closely and plan and think about how you're going to, work out the real marriage when it finally happens. Okay? So when you have this at the back of your mind, then you know that you are ready, you are now in it, and you need to start to work it out. Okay? One thing I must say is that my producer just reminded me that full disclosure is unnecessary in courtship. You feel like we're not getting married. Let me just tell him everything about myself. Let me just tell her everything about myself. I must, put some caution here, because when you are courting, the fact that you're not going to get married does not mean that everything about you is important to the marriage that lies ahead. No. The only information about your past that you need to share when it comes to talking about yourselves at this time that you're now agreeing to get married is information that is pertinent to your future together. All right. So there's some information that is unnecessary. Don't give information. Don't talk about yourself in areas that you know that are not, going to add value to your future. So let me give an example. If you have a child from your past, that is pertinent information you must give. If you had an abortion in your past as a young lady, you should share it with him, because there are implications that, that abortion could have in your future. And you must take the risk of sharing it, trusting that if he has made up his mind to marry you, in fact, all this should have shared before he got to the point of getting married, so that whatever comes in the future, based on something you did in the past, doesn't take people unawares. Okay? So in sharing and living together and communicating, which is a very strong part of being in courtship, share everything that you know is pertinent to the future you are going to have together. Okay? Now, having said that, one of the major things you must do while in courtship is communicate. You must talk. When I say talk, I'm talking about deep talk. I'm not talking about superficial talk about what's happening in the office. You're talking about your boss, your subordinates, your co-workers, how far your business is going, how well your business is going. That's not the kind of talk I'm talking about. I'm talking about deep talks that have to do with the future that you're planning together. So communicate and talk to each other about the things that really matter. For instance, money. How are you going to manage money? Just talk about it. I know that some people talk about things that, things before they get married, and after they get married, they renege on some of the things that they had talked about before. However, I'm expecting that you are people who are committed to each other, you're truthful to each other, and so the things that you discussed before will remain the things that you have discussed even after you get married. Okay? So let's talk about money. What are the things that matter about money? Who earns it? Who doesn't earn it? Who keeps it? And how you spend it? Okay? Where do you keep it? And how do you spend it? These are things you should have discussed. I've heard several options of how people deal with money. Some people talk about joint account. Whether the account is joint or not is beside the point. What is the real issues about money is who earns it? Who brings it home? Whose responsibility is it to bring it home? And when it comes home, where do you keep it? And when it's kept, how do you spend it? Those are conversations you must have. You really must have. Such things as, how do we want to raise our children? These are things you should discuss. How do we want to have our children? Do you want to have them as soon as you get married? Or do you want to wait a few years before you get married? After you get married, before you have them? Do you want them spaced closely or do you want them spaced far apart? Do you want, what sexes would you prefer? Okay. And if you don't get those sexes, what is your response? Okay. What kind of schools do you want them to go to? What kind of education do you want to give them? You know, how do you want to raise them? What kind of discipline do you want to put in place when children are born? Don't assume that your spouse will get it right or that your spouse to be knows what to do. Don't assume that you guys have it all together without talking about it. Discuss the issues. Talk about them. And I'm not necessarily talking about the fact that talking about them means that you are locked into the things that you decide. No. Because you can get married and find out that your circumstances are such that you have to change the things that you talked about before you got married. But discuss them. Talk about it. Because these are what seem like, the word of God talks about the fact that little foxes spoil the vine. Yeah? So they don't have to be big issues. Sometimes it's just the little things that are not done well that cause problems in marriage. So discuss these things. There are stereotypes that we know. The wife cooks, the husband brings home money. But we know that these days that the wives bring home lots of money too. In many cases, the wives bring home more money than the husbands. So is that stereotype of wifey being at home and husband bringing money, or even though they both work, the husband's contribution is much bigger than the wife's. That stereotype cannot be assumed anymore. So you must agree on other things. So both of you now go to work and come back from work. So if your husband gets back if the man gets back before the woman from work, does he sit back and watch TV and wait until his wife comes back to fix dinner? I am not saying that it is wrong or right. No. I'm just saying agree on the way forward. My daughter would say if he cannot make dinner, then that's his business. But that might not be the attitude that every other couple will take. So you need to discuss it, because for couple A, it might be all right for the man to wait for the wife to come back and make dinner. For couple B, the man just goes in, boils the rice and warms the stew and waits for his darling to come home. But discuss it. Talk about it. Don't assume that it will work itself out. Because if you do that, a girl is at work working very hard. You get back home and you're waiting for her to come back. And she's thinking, okay, honey is at home. I'm sure he'll sort things out. And she gets back and honey hasn't done anything. It can create friction that you don't need. And the only reason to create friction is because you have not discussed it. Because if you're the kind of person, if you are marrying a guy who feels, I will wait until you come back and fix dinner, it is possible. You should know. And you can decide, I don't want that. You can decide so and say, I'm not marrying this guy. But you can also decide that he's that kind of person and I'll just do what I need to do. That's it. And you will be on the right side, both of you. Both sides are okay. It's about the couple in question. What do you want? Discuss it. Don't assume that it will work itself out. Because in working itself out, you find resentment setting, anger setting, bitterness setting, and before you know what's happening, it's really just about who makes dinner. Who makes dinner is a very simple thing. However, because it wasn't properly discussed, it becomes a problem. What about handling family members? How do you handle family members? Should it be discussed? Absolutely. In times I just say a man shall leave his father and his mother and cleave unto his wife. Yes. However, what does that really mean? Does that mean you will not talk to your parents anymore? Does that mean you will no longer talk to your siblings? No, it doesn't. Does that mean that siblings cannot come and visit? No. Is that what it means? No. So there are different things that it means to different people. So you have to work out what will work. Because you still have to have contact with your parents. You still have to have contact with your siblings. You still have to have contact with your loved ones. So what is the formula to making it work? I think these things should be discussed. And they are pertinent to a marriage relationship. Okay? And so let's discuss. Let's communicate on the things that are real issues in marriage. At this point, when you're in courtship, in the dating period, you could have talked about our Nigerian soccer team, how they're not doing very well. Arsenal and, Liverpool, how well they are doing. Kim Kardashian and how well she looks. And all the movies you've watched all the recent movies. Every movie before it comes out, two of you have planned it, you have gone to watch it. And there's nothing wrong with all that. However, these are not the things that will sustain your relationship. And when it comes to really having a marriage relationship, they have no impact on what your marriage eventually becomes. Which is why you need to now discuss the things, talk about the things that really matter when it comes to marriage. Okay? These are very important. So one of the most important things that a courting couple must do is communicate, talk. Talk and listen. Hear each other. Say what you feel, but also hear what the other person feels. And then agree on the way forward. Because what each of you feel might not be in sync, but there must be a point of compromise where both of you agree, okay, we'll meet each other at this point. And that way you have a win-win situation. When you get married, it's easier to handle these things. Am I saying that everything that you decide before you get married, is that exactly how it will happen? No. Most probably not. However, having discussed it, you have an idea of how each of you feel about these things, so that by the time you're discussing it when you're getting married, it's not going to be a total new war. Okay? It's just going to be something you're going to say, okay, I know that this is how you feel, this is how I feel, which way forward? Okay? And nothing you hear will be totally strange. Are there things that will come up that never came up when you were courting? Oh, yes. But form the habit of communicating, of talking through things. Be that couple that constantly talk, so that when new things come up, you have the capacity to talk through them just like you always have. But if you don't talk, when new things come, it becomes difficult to have those conversations. So communication is critical to having a successful marriage. Okay? Now, another thing that comes up is the issue of sex. How do we deal with each other sexually? After we're getting married, some people would say. Biblically, sex is a marriage thing. It's not a courtship thing. It's not a dating thing. It's a marriage thing. A lot of parents in this season are concerned about how to manage the digital world with parenting.
This has consequence on our national economies. I said it before. Part of the reason we're seeing rampant corruption is that people are saving money for generations of one to cushion them from a life that they didn't get them ready for.
Yeah. So, if you can just hold yourself, tell yourselves, we can do all this as much as we want later when we do get married, and then you get on with it. Don't put yourself in compromising situations where these things can happen. Avoid being alone in quiet, private places. Avoid that so that you can be accountable for the time you spend together, okay? And that is very critical to the success that you have in marriage later. Now, am I saying that because you didn't have sex before you got married, then your marriage will definitely succeed? No. So don't get me wrong. I'm just saying that you are obeying God, and it's good to obey God, all right? Because he has his reasons for doing these things. Your chances of success in marriage are higher when you keep away from sex. However, if you do have sex, it now compromises your chances of actually succeeding in marriage. There are other things. However, when you do this, it's like a seed you plant that is not necessarily good for your relationship, okay? So let's keep that out of the bag for now, all right? So in planning your wedding, and like I said, it's not only about planning the wedding, but you also need to plan the wedding. So a few things I must say about planning the wedding. Remember that the wedding is just one day. And so in planning it, plan within your resources. Don't break the bank, because remember that there's a life after the wedding day. So ensure that you have protected the life after the wedding day before you now spend all your resources on the wedding day. You must be wise about that. And so there are lots of ways that you can, plan yourself and ensure that you don't leave yourself stranded. People get married, and after getting married, they're in debt. People get married, and after getting married, they can't afford, to get married. They can't afford to be together. They have not gotten a place to live. They're not able to put food on the table. They are financially, strapped because of all the cost of getting married. So make sure that in getting married, that day of the wedding doesn't now become the reason you are stranded after the wedding. Because when you put yourself through financial squeeze in the early stage of marriage, it puts a lot of pressure on the marriage, and you don't need that. So in all your planning, in all the buying of beautiful wedding dresses, all the planning of the highbrow venues, and the food and the caterers and the pictures and all the things that we do, no problem. However, make sure that you do not leave yourself stranded, so that when you finish the wedding, you can still have a good life. Don't get into debt because you're getting married, because of your wedding day. No, that's a no-no. Don't get into debt because of your wedding day. And if you do have to get into debt, make sure that you have it properly planned out. But I do not succumb or subscribe to a wedding day that takes all your resources to the point where you now get into debt. No. You need to be careful about that so that you don't have financial pressures to live with just as you get married. You don't need that. There's still plenty of time for you to deal with financial pressures in marriage. Children will come. School fees will come. Building your house will come. Different, scenarios that require and that always end up making people have, constrained finances, but not a wedding day. Not a wedding day. That's not wise. Okay? So I've been talking to you as that couple that are about to get married. You want to get married, you have agreed to get married. And, there are a couple of things that I feel that, people need to do. Last thing is that ensure that everything that you're doing is building your relationship and making it stronger. Building your relationship and making it stronger. Don't compromise your relationship and expose it unduly, to circumstances that will not build it. Keep building it. Keep communicating. Keep being kind to each other. Keep being loving to each other. Keep forgiving each other. Keep learning to love and forgive. Keep learning to be patient with each other. Keep learning to be generous to each other. Keep that going, because that helps to strengthen your relationship as you're going along. Make sure you keep that going as you are doing these other things that we're talking about, okay? And as you do that, I can assure you that you are building the right foundation for you to get married. You are becoming more friends in the time of courtship, so that by the time you get married, you're actually just good friends. The truth is that a friendship, when a couple are friends, marriage is easier and nicer. Truly. When a couple that is a guy and the girl is married, are friends. They are friends who trust each other, who commit to each other, who are there for each other, who stand for each other, who encourage each other, who motivate each other to be better and to be their best selves. That kind of marriage can only thrive. And that's what we want you to build in the period in which you are courting. Everything we have said is about strengthening your friendship. When you get into sex, you weaken the friendship because you are now entangling emotionally where you shouldn't entangle. And then you depend on that. Meanwhile, it's not strong enough. You need to have a real friendship, not a sexual one. All right? And at the end of the day, it just helps you get stronger for marriage. When the time you get married, you find that it becomes very easy to flow. Very easy to flow. People will respect your flow and you yourself will love your flow. Okay? So it's been a long conversation and we can go on and on and on and on, but time is never on our side. And so it's been great sharing my thoughts with you on what courtship should really entail, and I'm sure that as I've shared with you, you have seen areas that you need to, tweak a bit, areas you need to make better, and areas you need to bring down, and stop, all right, as you court, all right? Courtship is a beautiful thing because it takes you into the real thing. It's like a prelude to the real thing, but if you don't use it well, if you don't use that period well, what happens is that you're not quite ready for the real thing. And when you get there, you have stormy weather, especially in the first early years. They always say that the first few years, if you can survive the first few years, you will survive marriage. But I'm discovering that it's not just the first few years. You can discover this, pass through the phase of the first few years, and then the real trouble starts after 10 years, or after 15 years, after 20 years. So we must build certain habits. We must have certain habits, and those habits will continue to sustain your relationship in marriage when you eventually get married, okay? So it's been great talking to you today. I'm sure that the tips we have shared with you today will make a huge difference to your courtship. And if you're dating and you're about to enter into the courtship phase, these are the things you need to do, to be able to strengthen your courtship and strengthen your relationship for the marriage relationship. Either way, what we're just trying to do is ensure that you are thriving in courtship so that you can thrive in the real marriage, okay? So it's been great talking to you. I'm hoping that you are going to be able to use the things that we have shared, because if you don't use them, they're not going to make much difference to you. So please use information that you have heard today and make that relationship a stronger one, okay? So thank you so much for joining me. It's been great being here. Remember that on our social media pages, we're still talking. We're still sharing on these issues. Just join our conversations on Instagram. We're Dovers with Chinwe. On Twitter, we're Dovers with Chinwe Kalu. On Facebook, we're Dovers with Chinwe Kalu. On YouTube, we are Dovers with Chinwe Kalu. Please make sure you subscribe to our channel, comment, interact with us, engage with us on our discussions on YouTube. And I'm sure that we'll all be having a good time with it, okay? I'll see you again same time next week. God bless you and bye-bye.